Thank you for being patient with me, you guys. This is a little, you'll be glad when I'm done with my part here. Okay, we are going to do a poll, and I'm launching the poll. The poll should show up on your screen, and there are 3 questions in this poll. And we'd love it if you would answer the questions, and then I'll share the results with everybody. And Madonna, I hope that you are getting the sound now. If you have needed to call in, if you go to our Facebook page, the phone number to call in to get the video, get the audio through your phone is on the Facebook page. Thank you guys for doing the poll. We've got about half people have voted now. We've got 51 people in here today. And thank you. We have a great helper, Cassie Connolly, today, who's letting everybody in from the waiting room so that they don't sit out there while I'm blabbing away and not paying attention. So thanks a lot, Cassie, for doing that. Oh, Idaho Master Naturalist. Well, that's wonderful. We love working with the Idaho Master Naturalist. Oh, and Boise Paddlers, good. Well, you guys have a great program ahead of you today. We'll get the poll go for a little bit longer. Again, we are asking people when they're first entering the meeting to put their name and what their favorite bird is in the chat. And then we are also asking people if they have some kind of peculiar numbers or something that's how they're being shown. That's who they are. We'd like you to rename yourself and give your name. It's okay if it's just your first name. Oh, right, yeah. We will answer, we'll get some of those questions answered. Yes, thank you, John. All right, a couple more people want to vote, and then I'm going to close the poll. All right, I'm going to end the poll because we're going to get to our program here. I'm going to share the results. This was an anonymous poll, by the way. So you should be seeing it, and you can see that about half of the people have birded along the Boise River and half have not yet. That we have a lot of people who have who's found out about the meeting through our BREN, Boise River Enhancement Network, social media, and also through Golden Eagle Audubon, from a friend, from a teacher. That's awesome. And then we had people writing in chat on some of the other things that they did. And have you attended BREN programs before? Little more than half of the people have. So we'll welcome back everybody who's come to one of our programs before, and a big warm welcome to everybody who hasn't come to one of our programs before. And I think, yes, perfect timing. We're at 11:45. I'm going to stop sharing the results, and I am going to close the poll so it's not in my way, so I can see what I'm doing. And I am going to also then forward the screen that you are seeing there. And you can see the organizations that are sponsoring today: Boise River Enhancement Network and the Golden Eagle Audubon. And there's our websites. And we're both on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm going to turn it over to Audra Lobdell, if I can unmute her, from Golden Eagle Audubon, to talk a little bit more about Golden Eagle Audubon. It's all yours, Audra.
Okay, thanks, Liz, and thanks for hosting us and hosting the talk today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the offerings Golden Eagle Audubon Society has going on right now. So normally we do a lot of in-person bird walks and classes this time of year, but obviously that's not really possible with the stay-at-home order going on right now in Idaho. So we've been kind of coming up with some creative ways we can keep people engaged online. So we have a few different things going on right now. The first being our Art and Mindfulness Challenge. So it's going on the entire month of April. So even though April's halfway over, you can still participate. And you can jump on our website at goldeneagleaudubon.org and learn more details about the challenge and how to register. But essentially, it's just encouraging people to get outside for at least 15 minutes every day to observe birds in your local area. And by participating and registering, you'll automatically be entered into raffles for weekly prizes. And the prizes are pretty awesome. Some of them are bird guides, water bottles, and we even have a Cornell Lab online course available for a prize. So again, just get on the website and you can register there, and there's some cool things associated with it, like tracking sheets so you can keep track of the birds that you're seeing. We have some nature journal pages if you're into nature journaling, or if you like drawing birds and things that you see outside in nature. So make sure you check that out before it's over at the end of the month. The other thing that Golden Eagle has really been doing is boosting our presence on our social media outlets. So if you join our Facebook or Instagram, we're posting stuff almost daily, and we're trying to make them very interactive. So there's things like self-guided bird guide pamphlets. We're doing live story time bird books on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. on Facebook Live. And just other things like guest posts from local photographers and other interesting things like that. So I hope you'll join us on our Facebook or Instagram. And then lastly, the other thing that we're doing right now is we have a weekly Zoom presentation series. So they're every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. and they're going on through Tuesday, May 5th. So again, if you jump on our website, you can see our event calendar, and there you can see the whole list of what the topics are. They're a different topic every week, and there is a guest speaker for each Tuesday. So you can get on the website and see what the links are and how to register and what the different topics are. So yeah, I hope you'll join us for that as well. And thank you for joining the talk today.
Thank you very much, Audra. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to the Boise River Enhancement Network chair of our outreach committee, Cassie Oh, sorry, my bad, not Cassie. Cassie's doing our co-hosting. Sorry, a member of our outreach committee, Jane Kreller, to tell us a little bit more about the Boise River Enhancement Network. Let me get the slide up for her. There we go. Okay, Jane, I think you're on.
Hi, everyone. So thanks for joining us. This is great. We're still able to do things like this in the middle of a COVID crisis. Boise River Enhancement Network is an outstanding network of people that we live, work, and play in the Boise River watershed, and they're dedicated to promoting the ecological enhancement of the river. I can't recommend them highly enough. At the very least, join their newsletter and stay abreast of all these wonderful things that they do for our community. Something like this is a real treat on a day when the world seems like it's going crazy around us. And want to say thank you to our sponsors, Stantec, Kennedy Wilson, Roundhouse, Barber Valley Development, ARI, I hope I said that right, forgive me if I didn't, Resource Systems Incorporated, the Idaho Army National Guard, and Idaho River Sports. Thank you so much, guys. We do have some upcoming Zoom classes just like this, so keep your learning happening throughout the COVID crisis. Using no-till farming to improve the water quality with Josie, and that's April 24th at 11:30. Enhancing habitat at Barber Park with Roger and Alan, May 1st, 11:30. And visit the website, boiseriverinhancement.org for details, and also keep up to date with the blog. And you can also find us on social, so you can see all of the events that we have upcoming.
Thank you so much, Jane. And we're gonna go now also to go ahead, Jane, and you can introduce our great speaker.
We are so lucky to have Louisa Evers here to share her knowledge about the birds of the Boise River. Before she recently retired, she was the Science and Climate Change Coordinator for the Oregon-Washington State Office of BLM. And prior to that, she was with the Interagency Fire Ecologist, working for both Oregon, Washington BLM, and Region 6 of the Forest Service. But I think what's drawn her to this course and to this Zoom is that she's a key member of BREN and the Golden Eagle Audubon Society, and she's an accomplished hobby birder and photographer. So everybody, let's welcome Louisa.
Okay, let me get my screen up here and ready to go. Come on, come on. There we go. What's going on here? Why isn't this working correctly? Start the slideshow. There we go. Okay. Welcome everyone. This is a talk that I gave with Heidi Ware Carlisle in STAR earlier this year, and we thought it would be worth reprising it. Unfortunately, Heidi could not join us because at this very same time, she is teaching her ornithology class remotely. So I'm going to be doing this by myself. I'd also like you to note that on the blogs, the Birding Mindfully, some advice from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology about how to safely bird during the coronavirus issues. We also have a blog, one I've been working on, called Birds of Middleton River Park, a proposed park in the town of Middleton. And they would like people to bird the park to find out what kind of birds are there and use that as part of the information in designing the park. We also have an ongoing project to bird the center field of the La Bois racetrack. So people are encouraged to go out there and bird that and report their findings in eBird. So on with the program here. Birds of the Boise River. Of course, this is developed through another community partnership, the Golden Eagle Audubon Society. Heidi is with the Intermountain Bird Observatory with the Boise State University. This is actually one of her presentations that we modified for this purpose. And of course, the Boise River Enhancement Network. So let's talk about the Boise River itself. It serves as an ecosystem anchor. It's providing water, nutrients, and food to birds of the area. And of course, one of the more important parts that it provides is a lot of food along the river to various birds, as well as shelter and nutrients. So some of the more important food that's found along the Boise River are, of course, the aquatic insects, fish, and other amphibians, and the plants, either the plants themselves, the leaves, the buds, the fruits, or the insects that feed on those plants. All important sources of food along the Boise River. And it's a major habitat shaper of the area. So how does it shape the habitat? It's mostly through how it affects the availability of water and the water table along the river. And the river has several components of habitat. There are the uplands, which is the drier part of the river. It's where you might see things like sagebrush. The riparian understory, which is a mix of usually brush species, but also grasses and forbs that are important to birds. And then the cottonwood canopy, which is kind of obvious for a lot of the perching birds that rest, feed, nest, whatever in the canopy itself, as well as providing important shade to manage the temperatures. And then the river itself, there are a lot of birds that feed in the water. So why should we study birds? Birds can literally serve as the canary in the coal mine. The mix of species that you have in an area can tell you a lot about the quality of the area. They kind of serve as an umbrella taxa. Usually what's good for birds is good for everyone else, including us. And this works at all trophic levels, from insects, all the way through to mammalian predators and people. And of course, the mix of species can tell you how good your habitat quality is. The greater the mix of species you have and the different types of birds that you have, usually it indicates that you have higher quality habitat and a more functional ecosystem. So a lot of birds we find in our backyards as well as along the Boise River. And then why are they where they are? First of all the main thing is the habitat. What kind of habitat is available? What kind of food? Is there water? Is there shelter? And then there is sufficient space for the birds to set up their territories for breeding. And then a lot of these things you can provide, and we'll go into that somewhat later. So let's look at the kinds of birds that are using the river directly. Birds swim in the river, they fish in the river, they may rest in the river, and like these geese, the eagle there is of course going after a fish. I don't know if he was successful, but it sure looks like he's got his eye on something. Okay, some of the more specific species, this is a bufflehead. They're more commonly seen in the winter than they are at this time of year. When they're nesting, they get fairly secretive. They're a diving duck in that they dive under the water to get to their food at the bottom of the river. The one on the right is a male bird with the white on the back of his head there. Next to him is the female with the little white cheek patch. Of course, there's Canada geese. About this time of year, we should be starting to see goslings showing up on the river. I've seen some birds on nests already, although a lot of the birds are not there yet, but kind of for the next few months, we should be seeing goslings of varying ages swimming in the river. The kingfisher, we heard the call a little bit later, that rattling call. This is a diving bird. He usually hunts from a perch and then dives into the river to catch small fish. The males and the females are a little bit different in that the females are slightly more colorful than the males. They have a chestnut band across their chest in order to, as well as the blue band that's across the chest. This is a double-crested cormorant. This is the only cormorant that is an inland cormorant. All the other cormorants are coastal. You'll see them swimming in the river. They're often quite low in the river when you see them. They also dive. As you can tell from that beak, they catch fish for their meal. And they're kind of an interesting bird in that in order to dive well, since they're such a large bird, their feathers are not entirely waterproof. So another way you can see these birds is on stumps out of the water, or you'll see them like at Esther Simplot Park on those orange balls that are in the river, and they have their wings spread out in order to dry their wings, and so that then they can go diving again. Here's a common goldeneye, beautiful male bird. These are getting a little bit more scarce now. They usually don't spend the summer here. They're one of our winter ducks. Another diving duck. You usually see them in big flocks, diving in the river, going after food on the bottom of the river. There's also another type of goldeneye that shows up called a Barrow's goldeneye that looks a lot like this. It has a little bit less white in the body, and that cheek patch, instead of being kind of a circle, is more of a crescent. And there's still some of these around, but they're getting scarcer and harder to find, and they're in smaller and smaller groups. Here's a common merganser. These guys are here year round. This is a nice male bird. The female looks quite different. In fact, you might think you're looking at two different species when you see the male and the female. Another fish-eating bird, you can kind of tell from that hook on the beak. You can't see it real well in this image, but they have little serrations on their beak as well to help them hold on to the fish that they catch. The females are mostly kind of a gray brown, and their heads and necks are reddish, and they have kind of a crust on their head. Here's the great blue heron, another one of our fish-eating birds. They also eat snakes and reptiles and amphibians of all kinds, and you'll also see them out in fields, particularly where cattle have recently turned out, going after voles. This handsome fellow is called a gadwall. He's what they call a dabbling duck, in that he tips up. So you see his back end sticking out of the water while he reaches down with his head to get food off the bottom. They also feed on the surface quite a bit. He may look rather plain from a distance, just kind of a nondescript grayish brown bird with a black butt. But when you see him close up, as in this picture, you can see they just have absolutely gorgeous feathers. They're very intricate and very beautiful. The female looks a lot like a mallard, except she doesn't have any white in her tail. And they'll also occasionally show that little white patch in the wing that you can just barely see on this male. Here's a pair of hooded mergans. Here's another mergan that we find in the area. Like the common mergan, it's also a fish-eating bird. The male is, of course, quite striking, as they often are. They're pairing up right now and starting to nest, so they're getting a little bit harder to see, a little more visible in the winter. And of course, the mallard, our most common duck on the river. Nice male bird here. The interesting thing about that, the head on the mallard, the head and the neck, is it's not really green. What it is iridescent. So in most lights, it looks green, but you can see them where their head will look black or blue or purple if the light hits it just right. It's basically light reflecting off the feathers instead of a color actually in the feathers. These guys have showed up just recently. This is the osprey. We heard the call earlier. They're starting to nest. I watched one bird out at Kingfisher Trail on Lake Lowell. He was starting to build his nest on a cell tower. I don't know how successful he's going to be with that before the cell folks come out and kick him off. But these guys also nest along the Boise River. And yet, like Liz mentioned, you'll see them diving in to fish in the river. They're kind of an interesting bird in that their wings have a special adaptation that allows them to go deeper into the water than a bald eagle can to get fish, and then they can get out of the water, whereas a bald eagle can only really touch the water. It has to catch fish right at the surface, which is one reason why bald eagles will try to steal fish from osprey. The other thing you may see happen with an osprey is it'll come out of the river with a fish, it'll turn that fish to where it's head on so that it helps streamline its flight. So now let's look at, yeah?
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. We've had a request that you repeat the name of the bird that you're showing the picture of a few times.
Okay.
That would be awesome. Thanks.
Alrighty. This is a yellow-breasted chat, one of the understory birds. The chat male has this beautiful yellow on the breast. They're a surprisingly small bird. They name chat from the number of calls and vocalizations that they make as part of their song. It hardly sounds like a bird at all. It sounds like you're listening to somebody messing around with a tape recorder or something. So this is the yellow-breasted chat. It's an insect eater, feeding in the understory for the most part. They should be showing up here fairly soon. This is a cedar waxwing. Their cedar waxwings are a little more conspicuous in the fall and winter into early spring because they tend to form large flocks. The waxwing calls of this little high buzzy call can be really hard to hear. And one of the reasons I learned I needed hearing aids is I couldn't hear these birds anymore. They have that beautiful yellow on the tail feathers. There's a little bit of red in their wings. And cedar waxwings mostly eat berries. This particular one is eating Russian olive fruit. This is a yellow-headed blackbird. They tend to be found more in the more marshy areas along the river. So wherever you have tall grasses or cattails or bulrushes, that's where you're going to tend to find yellow-headed blackbirds. Again, they're an insect eater. This is a male blackbird. And you see he's got a mouthful of caterpillars and whatnot that he's found, and he's taking them to his nestlings. They nest in this tall grass, build their nests in this tall grass or the rushes or whatnot. So again, yellow-headed blackbird. American robin, a lot of people should recognize these birds from their backyards. Very common bird. They're here year-round as well. They're singing right now, setting up their territories and getting ready to nest. This is a male robin here, which has a darker head, and the partial eye ring is a little more visible in the male, and their chests are a little redder or orange red or whatever you want to call it color. Robins are insect eaters, mostly in the spring through early fall, and then they switch over to fruits. And again, they nest in trees. In the wintertime, they'll form quite large flocks. Right now, those flocks have broken up for the most part, and they're pairing up and establishing their territories. Another common backyard bird, this is the house finch. As you can tell from that big bill, it's a seed eater. It'll go for your sunflower seeds, safflower seeds, things like that in your feeders if you have them. Finches are insect eaters like most birds in the spring and summer. That's usually what they feed their nestlings. They will also eat fruits and seeds. They like to nest in cavities, and they like to be near people. They do quite well in suburban areas. So there's quite a few of these finches along the river. So again, the house finch. These folks will be showing up pretty soon. This is the yellow warbler. Beautiful little bird, quite common along the Boise River in the underbrush. You may hear it sing its little song, which usually is rendered as sweet, 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 a little more sweet. Again, another insect eater in the river. The male is the most conspicuous bird, but it's still amazing how well in the green vegetation that something that is that bright a yellow can hide. So follow your ears, and eventually you will probably find a yellow warbler along the river. They're very common. This is a song sparrow. They are here year-round. They're another common backyard bird. They like sunflower seeds and millet. Very common bird to hear singing in the spring. Their song, and actually they will sing most of the year. There's very rarely that you don't hear a song sparrow singing at least once somewhere. Again, insects in the spring and summer, seeds in the fall and winter. And like most sparrows, they really like a lot of cover, so they like the brush. Now we'll move into the overstory. There'll be a couple of surprising birds here. These haven't shown up yet. You can kind of see it through the leaves. That is a male western tanager. Hopefully they will be showing up relatively soon. And again, this is another one where it's hard to understand how a bird that is that colorful manages to hide so well. Their song sounds a lot like a robin song, but it's a little bird, as they call it. It's a robin with a cold. Again, a really beautiful bird. They nest along the river, up in the cottonwood trees where they feed on fruits. And again, they will feed insects to their nestlings. Another bird which should be showing up here relatively soon, towards the end of the month or early May. This is the Bullock's oriole. The oriole nest you probably see right now in the trees, this little gray pouch hanging from the trees. Orioles build a hanging nest and raise their young in those. Again, they eat a lot of fruits and insects, and they actually can nest relatively low to relatively high in the trees. So usually, though, you'll see their nests above eye level. Look for these fellows. I know of a person in Burns, Oregon, who has orioles that nest in her yard. And one of the things she does is she sets out yarn of a different color every year, so she can go around her yard and know in what year that a particular oriole nest was made. This is a barn swallow. We have several species of swallow that you'll find along the river. The barn swallow is probably the most common, and it's rare that you don't find them associated with human structures of some kind. They build a mud nest up under a protective overhang. So you may find a barn swallow nest on the eaves of your house, or you can actually make a place for them where it's kind of like a bird house, but it's not really a house. It's just a place for them to anchor their nest with an overhang that provides protective cover. And barn swallows eat on insects. They catch them on the fly and the wing. You'll see them over the river catching insects over the river, and often over the treetops as well. This particular barn swallow has a couple of nestlings that it's feeding. Here's our friend, the red-winged blackbird, where you heard the song played earlier. They're singing up a storm right now, setting up their territories. These birds are interesting in that the males will mate with multiple females. So they set up a territory, and the better their territory, the more shelter and food that it has available in their territory, the more females that will nest in their territory. And sometimes it can be a little annoying this time of year to hear the red-winged blackbirds, because you can't hardly hear anything over them. They're quite loud, but they're a beautiful bird to watch sing. These little fellows, this is a sharp-shinned hawk. Sharp-shins typically are present down here in the winter time, and then they breed up in the forests up on the mountains. These fellows are interesting in that they're bird specialists. They're in a group of hawks called the accipiters, which feed on birds in particular. So I had a sharp-shinned hawk coming to my feeder this winter trying to catch birds. Don't know if he ever succeeded. I know he made attempts. Along with the sharp-shinned hawk, you'll see another similar-looking hawk called the Cooper's hawk. But the Cooper's hawks are down here and they nest year-round. They look up very similar to this. The main difference is the black on the head of this sharp-shinned hawk goes around to the back of the head, or what they call the nape, whereas in the Cooper's hawk, the black is pretty much just on the top of the head. Otherwise, they look very, very similar. So that's a sharp-shinned hawk. This is a tree swallow, another one of the many swallows that we have along the Boise River. Again, you'll see in like the barn swallow, you'll see them skimming along the river. They also will feed often higher up in the atmosphere than some of the other swallows. The swallows will tend to kind of partition the insects along the river into different levels, and some swallows will feed at lower levels and some swallows will feed at higher levels. Tree swallows are also cavity nesters. So if you can put up a bluebird box, if you're near the river or near a pond or something like that, you may get tree swallows nesting in your box. Here's our little black-capped chickadee, another year-round resident here. Right now, they're starting to set up their territories. So you'll hear them singing their little "Hey Sweetie" song. They eat insects in the summer. They're another common bird to come to your feeders. They like sunflower seeds, which they'll hammer open with their little bills. They can't open them directly. Or they'll eat millet, or if you have hulled sunflower, they'll really go for that. They'll also eat suet. They're a cavity nester. They can't build their own cavity with little bills. So chickadees will take over a nest that maybe a woodpecker made or some other bird, woodpecker type bird made. So the black-capped chickadee. Here's the downy woodpecker. This one is a female. The males have a little spot of red on the back of their neck. These guys are what they call primary cavity nesters, in that they will drill a cavity in a tree that has thin enough outer ring and some heart rot in it. They need the middle of the tree to be rotten in order to make their nest. And then other birds will use their nest after they're done with it. Again, they're mostly an insect eater, but they will eat seeds and fruits. They'll come to suet feeders in backyards. I don't know if they'll use nest boxes though. At this time of year, you can hear them drumming to establish their territories. They'll find a stick or a dead branch or something like that, a dead part of the tree, something that sounds really resonant, and they'll drum on that so that the sound carries and other downy woodpeckers know that, hey, this is my territory, stay out. So the downy woodpecker. Here's our friend, the great blue heron again. These birds surprisingly nest in trees in colonies, and there are several colonies, what they call a rookery, along the Boise River. Probably the easiest one to see is one that's near the East Park Center Bridge. It's on the south side of the river, but there are houses there, so you have to be mindful of the houses there. And again, they build this kind of stick nest that looks pretty flimsy, but it works for them. The young, when they're on the nest, you can tell there's young there because they make this god-awful clacking noise that's just incessant. So again, the great blue heron's nesting in the top of a tree, and they're definitely on their nests right now. There may be some hatchlings out already. I don't know for sure, because they were working on their nests just before we got our social distancing requirements. Another year-round resident. This is the great horned owl. There's not too many of them along the river, but you'll see them kind of scattered along the river. The horned owls are, as you might expect, they're a predator that hunt at night, and they rest during the day. The owls have already started nesting. They actually started nesting some time ago, and I've seen at least 2 owl nests that had young birds in them already. So, and the owls do something what they call asynchronous incubation. They'll lay several eggs, but unlike songbirds, they'll start incubating as soon as they lay their first egg. So if you see a horned owl nest with several young birds in it, you'll see that they're of different sizes because they're of slightly different hatch dates, usually about a day or 2 apart. Here's another common owl along the Boise River. This is the western screech owl. Screech owls will use nest boxes. In fact, a lot of people who have put up wood duck boxes come to check them, and they find that there's a screech owl in there. They will nest in there, or they will use them as winter cover, roost in there at night. And again, like the horned owl, they go after small mammals, mostly voles or whatnot. And since they're a smaller owl, screech owls go after a smaller mammal than a great horned owl will. Great horned owls will actually eat skunks. Here's a northern flicker. Several people said this was their favorite bird. The ones in our part of the world have red on the shafts of their feather that gives them that red look in their wings and their tail. And the male flicker has those red mustaches as well. These are another cavity nester. If they build their own cavity, the tree has to be pretty rotten because they're not what they call a strong cavity nester. They're more of a secondary cavity nester. They may take over another cavity that maybe another bird started, and they'll enlarge it and use that. A lot of times you'll see these birds feeding on the ground because flickers eat a lot of ants. as well as they will eat fruits too. The other thing that flickers do, which may or may not be annoying depending on your point of view, is like the downy woodpecker, they drum to establish their territories. And if you have a cap on your chimney, you may hear flickers drumming on your chimney cap, which is quite a startling sound. So lastly, we'll move into the upland habitat. Here we have the red-tailed hawk. This is our most common hawk. It has that gorgeous red tail, which makes it really easy to identify the adult birds at any rate. If you see a large hawk sitting on a pole somewhere, like along the interstate or something like that, odds are it's a red-tailed hawk. They eat small mammals and some reptiles as well. They're also nesting in the area. I've noticed when I go grocery shopping and drive back to my house, I drive by at least 2 red-tailed hawk nests in the area. Again, one of our most common hawks in the area, the red-tailed hawk. This is a California quail. They will likely come into backyards as well during the winter time in groups called coveys. They like the drier uplands. They like brush for cover, but they will kind of come out in the open. The quail will scratch like a chicken, which is no surprise because they're in the same family as chickens. Again, they're mostly seed eaters. When their young hatch out, they're able to fend for themselves to some degree right away. They can feed themselves, but they still rely on the parents to help them find cover and know where to go and whatnot. So the California quail, I love that little top knot. These birds have not shown up yet. This is a common nighthawk, but they should be showing up late May, June, somewhere in there. They're in a group of birds called the nightjars. They typically feed at dusk and dawn, flying high in the sky, catching insects. And don't be fooled by that little bill. The common nighthawk actually has a very large mouth. It just doesn't need much of a bill to do what it does. They have long, narrow wings with a white bar in the wings, so they're really distinctive when you see them flying around. So the common nighthawk. You may find them resting on a post or a rail or something like that during the day. I'm not sure if these guys have shown up yet. This is a lazuli bunting or a lazuli bunting. I've heard it pronounced both ways. Male has this blue head with the orangey breast and the white wing bars. The female is similar but duller in color, like most birds, female birds. Again, these guys like brush, often near riparian areas. That's one thing about the Boise River out here in the what is really desert, high desert, is many birds are attracted to water because that's where they're most likely to find what they need. So look for these guys in the brush. They like a little more open brush. They don't like the dense brush. So you might see them more in the uplands along the edges of the riparian area. Again, they eat insects, and you can tell with that bill, they also eat seeds. So here's our mourning dove, another common bird around, comes to backyards. I get a lot of mourning doves in my backyard. They're pretty much strictly seed eaters. Mourning doves are interesting in that they don't necessarily have a set breeding season. So one of the things the pigeons and the doves do is they feed their young something called crop milk, which is made in their crop from the foods that they eat. And then they will feed that to their nestlings. But mourning doves typically nest more this time of year than other times of the year. The ones that you'll see trying to breed at any time of year more often are the rock pigeons. But the mourning doves can be told from the collared doves, which is another bird that looks really similar to this, in that they're smaller, they're darker, and they have a pointed tail. The collared doves are larger, paler and they have a squared tail. Dove. This is a dark-eyed junco. These fellows are here in the wintertime. This time of year, they're leaving now to head up to the mountains where they breed. There's still a few of them around, but many fewer than there used to be. In the winter times, juncos will form these large flocks that you'll see feeding on the ground. They go to the shrubs for cover. And as you can tell from that bill, they're primarily a seed eater. They have those dark heads, kind of a chestnutty side and a brownish back. And often you'll see them flying away and they'll be flashing their white outer tail feathers at you, which makes them easier to identify, since often, mostly when you see them is when they're flying away from you. These hawks have just showed up recently. This is called a Swainson's hawk. They winter in South America and then summer up and breed up in here. You'll find them in open areas. So they'll use the edge of the Boise River. Wherever there's a field or whatnot, you might encounter a Swainson's hawk. They have that white around their bill and their chins. They look a little bit similar to a red tail, particularly a darker red tail, but their tails are not red. And the black on their wings is on the trailing edge of the wings instead of on the leading edge of the wings. Like the red-tailed hawk, they have a pretty similar diet in that they eat small mammals and reptiles for the most part. So this is the Swainson's hawk. Well, now I'll get a little bit more into backyard birds. If you look in the wreath that's hanging on the door, you'll see there's a bird nest there. Probably a house wren. They're kind of notorious for nesting in places like that. So to attract birds to your backyard, some things you need to do is provide plants and brush piles for shelter. So brush, in the wintertime, particularly conifers, because those help cut the wind. It's better to use native plants than cultivars or the exotic flowering plants that people like to put in their yards. They provide a higher quality of food and shelter that these birds are adapted to. It provides more nutrients to them a lot of times than some of the exotic plants that we put in our yard. If you have feeders that provide seeds, like tube feeders. Put sunflower seeds in those. Fruit, a lot of birds will eat fruit through the winter. Suet and nectar in the summer. The hummingbirds will come to nectar feeders, and actually so will orioles. Orioles will also come to grape jelly. But if you put out grape jelly for orioles, make sure that it's a small enough container so they don't get the grape jelly in their feathers, because that could really mess them up. And most importantly, provide water in the form of a fountain, a pond, some sort of drip, or a bird bath. It can be really important to provide water in the winter time. So providing some sort of like heated bird bath or heated drip or something like that, because water gets harder for the birds to find in winter with so many things frozen over than it does in the summer. But water can be equally important in summer, particularly in our drier summers. So if you have water, and even if you don't provide much in the way of food, you will probably get birds into the backyard. So that's the end of my presentation for now. Thank you for listening. And again, Golden Eagle Audubon, the Intermountain Bird Observatory, and the Boise River Enhancement Network are the ones who made this talk possible. So thank you to those folks as well. And I guess now I'm ready for questions.
Thank you very much, Louisa. That is so awesome. So we will take questions through the chat.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat. Okay, I see one question. Are Swainson's hawks that common around the river or more away from the river? You're more likely to see them away from the river. Actually, the Morley-Nelson Birds of Prey Conservation Area has a high number of Swainson's hawks, but I have seen them in farm fields that are near the river. So I get a question here, how to get involved in birding. There's two main birding organizations around here. Which one you go to might depend on where you live. Of course, there's Golden Eagle Audubon, and you heard about some of the programs that they put on. And like Adria is saying, they have their, when we have to do less social distancing, they'll probably resume their beginning bird walks, which is a good way to get involved in birding at the first. Adria can probably correct me on any mistakes I make about this, but you see there's some experienced birders on those walks. They go to various areas in the Boise area. Golden Eagle will provide binoculars to help you get started, and just spend a little bit of time walking around a local area like Hyatt Hidden Lakes or something, and get to know the birds around there. Another birding organization is the Southwest Idaho Birding Association. They meet once a month out at the, oh gosh, at the Deer Flat Visitor Center on the second Thursday of the month. Audubon also has a monthly program when things get back to more normal on the third or the fourth Tuesday of every month. I forget which one right now. And both those organizations help you get involved with birding and help you figure out you know, what kind of equipment you need. Fortunately, it's one of the cheaper hobbies to get involved in. The biggest expense is probably the binoculars. But other than that, it can be a pretty easy way to get a hobby that's relatively cheap and get you outside and exercise and whatnot. Let's see, what are some tips to bird identification? That can be a little difficult to talk about in a short period of time. Golden Eagle has been putting on some classes on bird identification. There is also classes once a month, once a week, except for the month of August, up at the Foothills Learning Center. There's also classes that you can take online through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, although those cost. A lot of times it's start by trying to figure out, you know, exactly what group your bird falls into. Like, is it a duck? Is it a hawk? Of course, the hard ones are the songbirds, because it's hard to understand right away just by quick looking, you know, what kind of group the bird falls into. But take a look at your bird guide, read the introduction on for each group of birds, like woodpeckers or flycatchers or something. It'll tell you something about that group of birds that can help you at least start to narrow it down. Let's see. How do you differentiate mergansers from golden eyes at a distance? One thing to look at is the bill. Does it have a duck-shaped bill, or does it have a long, pointy, narrow bill? Mergansers all have long, narrow bills. And golden eyes have kind of a typical duck bill, like you see in the picture there on the slide. So that's one good way to tell them apart. The other is size, for the most part. Like a common merganser is much larger than a goldeneye. A hooded merganser may be of similar size, but they will look really different in terms of the amount of white that's in them. A good recommendation for a packable bird book. I have the field guide Boise Birds, but would like something a little more extensive, but not a reference. There are several good bird guides around that are intended to be carried in your pocket, as it were, although really they're a little bit bigger than a pocket. The two I would recommend are the Sibley Birds West, the Sibley Guide to Birds of the Western United States, and the National Geographic Bird Guide. Those are two excellent bird books that are in small format intended for you to carry into the field. Let's see. Is there a listserv for local birders focusing on sightings or migrant arrivals? There is a listserv. It's IBLE, Idaho Birders, linked electronically. Unfortunately, I can't remember offhand the details for getting onto that list, but probably if you were to Google IBLE, right now there's an older version that's on Yahoo. Don't use that one. Use the other version that is on a different platform, but I just can't remember the name of the platform off the top of my head. Any other questions? It doesn't look like there's any other questions. Liz?
Well, let's give Louisa just a big thumbs up and a virtual round of applause. That was really an incredible presentation. That was just a huge amount of information, and we're so glad that seems to have sparked some interest in folks. I do have that poll up. You can give us a little feedback. If I can figure out how to, probably got it pretty good. I'm gonna end the polling on that one. Okay. And a big thank you to Ken Miracle. Many of those photos were taken by Ken Miracle, as well as some other awesome photographers like Louisa, but Ken was at least on the call to begin with. And so thanks a million, Ken. He's been extremely generous with letting the Boise River Enhancement Network use his photos repeatedly. And we just enjoy seeing the photos, and we know that people enjoy seeing them on our social media. So we will be back next week for our for a different sort of a program. Josie Erskine is the co-owner of the Peaceful Belly Farm, and she also works for the Ada Soil and Water Conservation District, and she will be giving a program called Using No-Till Farming to Improve Water Quality. So this is all about how we can improve the water quality in the Boise River for both, of course, birds, fish, insects, people. Everybody wants to have good, clean water, and it's amazing what farmers can do that will, and are doing, that will improve water quality. So, without further ado, unless there, type your question quickly if you have another question. We're looking great. I am going to end our meeting. And remember that this was recorded. So if you came in late or you want to see those birds again, I know somebody said put the names on the slides. So we can't go back and do that right now, but you can watch the recording and hear the names of the birds again. And you can also then share the recording with whomever you would like. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you, Louisa.